Hey there listeners, welcome back to another video. Today we're reading Beethoven, based on the smash hit film it says, but this is the Beethoven book. I adored this when I was little and I kind of really wanted to carry on. So this is chapter 2. If you like this sort of content and you want to see more, hit the like button, hit subscribe, as well as that cheeky notification bell to be notified when more videos drop. And with that, let's jump in. Chapter 2. There were dogs in cages at a place on the other side of town, but they weren't happy or hopeful the way dogs in the pet shop were. These dogs were penned up in dirty, rusting cages stacked in a cold, dreary, damp warehouse. A sign outside the building said that it was a home to Dandy Pup Pet Supply, but that was just a name that had been made up to disguise what really went on inside the grim old building. The Dandy Pup Pet Supply warehouse was in a rundown part of town, an area that also home to some old factory, scrapyard, and the Vista Valley Central Market. No one in the neighborhood knew or cared what really went on at Dandy Pup, and the owner and the two men who worked for him didn't tell anybody. The real business of Dandy Pup Pet Supply was testing things on animals, illegal things like drugs and guns. To prevent cruelty to animals, the government strictly controls what testing companies can and cannot do. But Dandy Pup didn't play by the rules. Everything he did was unlawful. The business was run by a man called Dr. Varnick, and he spent most of the time bossing around his two helpers, Vernon and Harvey. Of the two men, Vernon was the smarter, but neither of them would have scored very highly in intelligence tests. Dr. Varnick was in charge of testing, and Vernon and Harvey handled the dogs and found ways of getting more of them for the doctor's evil experiments. Vernon and Harvey took stray dogs off the street and they kidnapped them from people's backyards. They didn't care where they got the dogs from, so long as they kept up a steady supply for their boss. That night, Vernon and Harvey were getting to the Dandy Pup Pet Supply van ready to go into Vista Valley to look for more dogs. It was thundering and raining outside, which was good for the dog nappers. There wouldn't be many people out, and the stray dogs would be easy to lure into a trap with some food. Not even stray dogs like to be out in the cold, rainy night. The van roared out of the warehouse into the dark streets. He was a thin, dark-haired, sort of greasy-looking guy who needed a shave. He seemed to be always in a bad mood. Harvey was a lot heavier than his partner, with curly hair and a fixed, kind of stupid look on his face. He had a tendency to be afraid of everything, which made him not really a successful criminal. Vernon and Harvey cruised the dirty streets around Dandy Pup Warehouse, looking for strays. They found a couple near the sewage treatment plant. One was an old mutt who seemed to be happy to get out of the wet rain until he was thrust into a cage in the back of the van. The shabby old dog knew instantly that he was in danger, cowering into the corner of his dirty cage. The other cat was a little Jack Russell Terrier. He wore a collar with his name on it, Sparky. He took one look at Vernon and Harvey and the cages in the back of the van and knew he would have to escape fast. They drove up and down the streets for a couple of hours and they only nabbed those two dogs. Vernon and Harvey were getting fed up, but they knew that they couldn't go back to the warehouse with only two dogs to show for a night's work. "The doc's gonna be really mad at us," said Harvey. "That's a brilliant observation," said Vernon sourly. "He'll have our hides. Gotta be really angry, probably fire us or worse." Vernon slammed the steering wheel with the heels of his hands, ponderingly angrily. "Would you be quiet, please? I'm trying to think here." "What are you trying to think about?" "I'm thinking about where we can get some fresh dogs. Puppies." "Puppies would be good," agreed Harvey. He was silent for a long time as he tried to figure out where the puppies came from. Finally, he said, "Where are we going to get puppies from, Vernon?" "From a pet shop." "A pet shop? I think they're all closed now, Vern. Besides, wouldn't that cost a lot of money?" "Don't be an ignoramus. We're going to steal them." "Oh, good thinking." The dogs in the Lando pet shop were not having a very good night. The puppies were afraid of the thunder and lightning that was booming and flashing. The little St. Bernard puppy was waiting anxiously for the morning light and the return of the nice girls who gave him food, not to mention the people on the street who made such a fuss over him. He looked out the window at the rainy, deserted streets. Morning seemed a year away, but then Vernon and Harvey arrived in their van. The St. Bernard jumped up on his hind legs, wagging his tail. He saw the two men getting out. Vernon and Harvey stood looking at the pet shop, each with a big sack in hand. "That's it," said Vern. "Are we going to break in?" asked Harvey. "That's right." "Well, in that case," said Harvey, "we should have a disguise." "A disguise?" Harvey pulled two neon orange ski hats from his pocket, both with little bobbles on top, and showed them to his partner. Don't say no right away, he said. Give yourself a minute to get used to the idea. No way, growled Vernon. He grabbed the 2 ski hats from Harvey's hand and tossed them in the back of the van. Get serious, he ordered. Harvey looked hurt. He thought it had been a pretty good idea. Vernon led the way to the front door of the pet shop. You don't need a disguise. I cased the place and it's a pushover. Now, come on. He lit a cigarette and puffed on it heavily. Is now the time for a smoke? Asked Harvey. Shut up. Vernon looked up and down the deserted pavement and then leaned against the flimsy front door of the pet shop. His elbow rested on one piece of the glass in the entrance. What about the alarm? Asked Harvey in a panicked whisper. Very quickly, Vernon slammed his elbow through the glass and reached in through the jagged hole and undid the lock. He took a deep drag on the cigarette and blew it in the doorway. The smoke swirled and got caught in the tiny beam of light stretched across the entrance. It was an infrared alarm beam. That's the alarm, he whispered. All you gotta do is step over it. Got it, said Harvey, starting to go into the shop. Vernon grabbed him by the shoulder and yanked him back. But don't step on the doormat. It's wired with an alarm too. Whoops, said Harvey. Together the thieves stepped over the alarm, taking care to avoid the doormat. Vernon closed the door behind them and grinned. All the dogs were looking at the 2 intruders curiously, wondering what was going to happen next. What did I tell you? Vernon muttered. In and out, as quiet as a mouse. You're one smart guy, Vernon, said Harvey admittingly. Then, all of a sudden, every dog in the shop started to howl at the top of their voices. The St. Bernard was the loudest. Harvey almost leapt out of his skin when the racket started. He jumped back in fright, covering his ears, and then he stepped on the doormat. In an instant the alarm sounded. The siren wailed, lights flashing and bells rang. The dogs howled and yelped and barked. Suddenly, there was enough noise coming out of the pet shop to wake up the entire town. Get some dogs! Get 'em now! Vernon ordered. The 2 thieves immediately started opening the cages, grabbing the dogs by the scruff of the necks and stuffing them into sacks. The instant the St. Bernard got shoved into a sack, he popped out and scampered across the pet shop and out of the front door. Getting crammed into a dark, smelly sack was not for him. Vernon and Harvey swung the wiggling sacks over the shoulders and ran for it. The St. Bernard was still on the pavement, and Vernon grabbed him and threw him in the sack. Come on, shouted Harvey. Hurry! The police sirens could be heard in the distance. The 2 dog nappers jumped into the van. Vernon started the engine and they zoomed away. Harvey stayed in the back, roughly grabbing the dogs out of the sacks and throwing them into cages. The little St. Bernard was terrified. Sparky, the stray they had picked up earlier that night, barked at him, shouting encouragement. Don't give up, he said. We'll get out of here. When Harvey finished, he climbed into the front of the seat of the van. It was travelling very fast, zooming through the deserted streets. Vernon checked the rearview mirror, looking for the police. They didn't seem to be following. He smiled, pleased with himself. Now, he shouted at Harvey, don't this beat taking strays off the street? You're right. You are a genius. Don't you ever forget it. Don't worry, I won't. Harvey clapped his partner in crime on the shoulder, but jousting him like that made the van swerve, the front wheel jumping the curb and bumping hard. Watch it! Vernon got the van back under control in a second. Don't do that again, he ordered. Sorry, said Harvey, but the damage had been done. When the van hit the curb, the force of the bump had upset one of the cages in the back of the van. Sparks' cage had crashed down and the rusty catch had broken open. The cage was wedged in the tight little corner between the 2 rows of cells. That didn't matter to Sparky. Quick as a flash, he darted out the cage. The little St. Bernard pup saw that his new friend was free and started barking wildly, which seemed to set off the other dogs. Sparky jumped up and pawed at the catch of the St. Bernard's cage. The latch wasn't fastened very tight, so it popped open. The St. Bernard jumped to the floor and watched as Sparky leapt in the air, trying to get the back door of the van open. All the other dogs barked and howled, shouting their encouragement. Vernon slowed down the vehicle a little bit as he cocked his head, listening to the racket in the back of the van. Why are they barking? Harvey thought for a moment. Because they're dogs. Go back and check, Harvey, Vernon ordered. Go back and check, Harvey. Go back and check, Harvey. Why is it always me who's got to go back and check? 'Cause I'm driving, Vernon shouted angrily. That seemed to make sense to Harvey. All right, good point. He swung out of his seat and made his way to the back of the van. He was shocked at what he saw. Sparky had managed to open the door of the van, and in an instant Harvey appeared. He and the St. Bernard pup jumped into the street. "Oh no!" yelled Harvey. "Vernon, stop the van!" Vernon stamped on the brakes and the van skidded to a halt in the wet street. Sparky and the St. Bernard weren't going to hang around to see what happened next. The two dogs took off, each going in a different direction. Sparky was the older dog, more streetwise and a lot faster than his young friend. He ran as fast as he could down the street and soon vanished from sight. The little St. Bernard puppy was terrified. He darted into an old dustbin that was lying on the pavement. He tried to make himself as tiny as possible, curling into a tight little ball, cowering in fear. He heard the sound of the angry voices, and he knew if the men found him, then they would certainly hurt him. He wondered where his friend Sparky was and hoped that he had managed to get away. The little puppy felt very lonely. Vernon was stomping around the street, shouting and cursing, yelling at Harvey. "That was really smart. Why did you open the door? If we had lost all the dogs, then the boss would have killed us. I don't know how you're going to talk your way out of this one." "I didn't open the door. The dog did," protested Harvey. "The dog did?" Vernon folded his arms across his chest and looked at Harvey as if he was crazy. "That's right," insisted Harvey. "The dog opened the door all by himself." "What? Are you saying the dog is smarter than you?" "Well..." Vernon slammed the door, catching Harvey's finger. "Oh!" He jammed his finger into his stomach, cradling it. "You did that on purpose." "That's right," said Vernon as he climbed back behind the wheel of the van. "You're a sadist." "Right again." He slammed the van into gear and sped off into the night. And there we go. There is chapter 2 of Beethoven. And I'm really hoping that you're enjoying this because I'm kind of really enjoying reading the book. Even though some chapters are a lot bigger and smaller than they are, but I'm really hoping that you're liking this. If you like this sort of content and you want to listen more, then please hit the like button, leave a comment down below, as well as subscribe, as it helps the channel grow in the algorithm. And let me know what your favorite dog is still, and how do you think this book is going to turn out, although you could pretty much watch the film. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for listening and watching. And with that, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, and I'll catch you in the next video.
チャンネルをサポートしてくれてありがとうございます。チャンネル登録、高評価お願いします。以下のリンクから商品を入手することができます。